Sure, Bojo, Anin, Niana Deshnakash, Kenokwe, Makwadodam, Alderville Donjaba. Speaking in the sovereign language of this land. I'm from Williams Treaty Territory, Alderville First Nation, Mississaugas of Rice Lake in southern Ontario, Anishinaabe Kwe, Ogichada Kwe. I work and live in Williams Treaty Territory, which is beautiful. I'm near my daughter's territory of Georgina Island First Nation. We are surrounded by the beautiful water here, Lake Simcoe, and we really rely on it as a way of life. So, yeah, just honored to be here and be part of this project and program, and the importance of our sacred Navy, Miigwech.
Awesome. Would you say that Lake Simcoe is one of your favorite bodies of water?
Ooh, I don't know if I have a favorite.
Do you have a favorite?
Well, I mean, always Rice Lake, right? Because that's my home,
Uh,
that's my identity, that's my DNA right there in that water. I
oh,
absolutely love it. I love going out to Shamong, like, out in
yeah.
Curve Lake, because I like to go out there ricing with James and his family. And so that's always home for me. I'm lucky enough, I'm a fisher girl. I love to fish, and I'm, out there, and even that sustenance, taking that hunting and gathering and fishing and taking from the land in a good way, and that relationship that I have with the water and the swimmers is beautiful. So I
Mm,
mean, I couldn't even pick a favorite. I had the opportunity to go fish sturgeon this year up in Wisconsin in Bad River area. Um, Geez, yeah. And then I travel the Southwest, so there isn't any water, and I really notice it when I'm away from home. So there's a
yeah.
few. Lake Simcoe's one of them. Like, I like to fish here. I've got all the ladies coming out next week if the ice holds out. So
But
yeah,
Rice Lake is home.
Rice Lake is home. Rice Lake is my identity. Yeah, my DNA.
Uh,
I'm a water carrier. I carried life. I carry life in that water, and that water is sacred. And that water, before that new life came to the earth, that water came first. And then that new life comes, and that water protected that beautiful life that I got to carry, that gift, and that water came first, and then that new life came. And so that water is sacred, and I'm sacred as a woman. There's such a beautiful connection there, and Creator gave us the role of creation to give that life and to bring that life, and we as women are the only doorway which with that human life comes to the earth. And we are sacred beings, and we need to be treated as such. And I think that the human nation has gone so far away from those teachings that, for me, it so instills in me, the teachings of the water and the sacredness and the language and the songs, and everything is about respect and loving and caring for that water. We're women. And I think that when we start thinking in those ways and thinking in our language and our prayers and the water, we have to be kind to one another. We have to look after each other. And so when we're looking after the water, we're looking after our sisters, our aunties, our daughters, our moms. But I hope that radiates out into, the patriarchal world and the mainstream that that's very consumer driven and very patriarchal. And I think that we have to move back to the traditional ways, and really teach our young people and really teach our young men the sacredness of the water and the sacredness and how connected that is. Like, as women, we carry that water, we bring that new life to the earth. So that's a gift. It's a gift to be able to carry that new life. I think that our connection is really tied again to our culture and our ceremony and our teachings. Like, our language is tied to the water,
mhm.
our lifeblood, right? Everything is water for us. I think that many non-Indigenous take it for granted that tap is always going to turn on, that they're going to get up every morning and brush their teeth and turn the tap on, and they're going to have drinking water. And I don't think that that's going to be a reality for their future generations. And I think that the importance and holding the ceremonies and the songs that cleanse the water, and the medicines that cleanse the water, I think that those are the most important education that our kids can have right now. And I think if we look at the education system, it's very skewed. It's very Eurocentered. And there is no education about conservation or environmental. There is now, sort of, but I mean, I took Indigenous environmental studies, so that, hearing the beautiful teachings tied. Dan Longboat was our prof, and his teachings
I
would just
love Dan.
they would just make me cry. His teachings were so beautiful, and he would share them with us. And how can you not be moved, about our connection to the earth, and all of the layers upon layers of all of creation looking after us and just loving us and taking care of us with everything, with all of that beautiful medicine and the Nibi and all of those teachings. And I think that there's a shift. I think that people around the world are kind of, looking at climate change and looking at environmental warnings and starting to kind of see a shift. Is it fast enough? Are they moving as fast as they should be? And I think part of the not hearing our message, sadly, is the racism and the fact that we're brown, and the message is being lost in that, and the importance of the message, and our traditional ecological knowledge and the knowledge that we carry moving forward, for our next generations. It's for their next generations too. When I pray and when I sing for the water, it's for all the directions. It's not just for the Red Nation, and we all need to thrive and survive here moving forward. So I think more and more people are starting to hear the voices of Indigenous, or at least valuing them a little bit more. But sadly, like I work in human trafficking, I work in sex assault and domestic violence. 12 times more likely to become a victim of violence or go missing. So, who's going to sing the water songs? Who's going to pray for the water? Who's going to cleanse the water? Our voices are being lost at an alarming rate. And with that is that eco side and going after the earth, because they don't understand the connection of women and the water and our connection to the earth, and how sacred it all is and interconnected. So I'm seeing a shift. I think that more needs to happen. I think that more efforts around protecting the water. I mean, Standing Rock should have been a wake-up call for many. It wasn't in their backyard, and it never is, right? Even here, like with the sewage, they called it the sewage solution. And I'm like, putting sewage into the lake is not a solution. That's just how you're packaging it in a bow. But, it's the value of Indigenous people and our viewpoint and our traditional ecological knowledge is less valuable to, I think, white society or non-Indigenous society, Euro society, only because of their own blindness. Not, if they actually listen to the messages and hear our ceremonies and hear our prayers, I think they think our prayers are about them, or we're going to do something to them, or they're fearful of them. And really, it's about the earth. It's always about the earth. It's always about protecting Mother Earth and our prayers. And I'm hoping more and more hear the message. And I think, with this information superhighway that we now, we're taking the best of this and using it in a good way and getting the messages out. I don't think that they can all come into our lodges, but how can we spread our message? And so we can spread it through this technology and through this format that's, reaching the masses. Maybe somebody somewhere will hear this message about the importance of water. I remember sitting at Trent University when they brought the world water leaders in from all over the world, the Kogi, Arvel, Josephine Bott. Like, there was just so many incredible teachers speaking about the importance of water and how our world is sick and that our water needs to be taken care of. That film that they did, and I wish I had the name of it, but I think that should be in curriculum. That should be in our schools. Those kinds of information. That's the kind of education that our kids need. And for me, teaching Cedar the water song since she was little, teaching her those prayers, and how do we pick our medicines, how do we pour lodge, what do we do? It's always connected to the water. We couldn't have that medicine if we didn't have the water. So our life revolves around the water, and we try and share that message everywhere we go. So we share the
Awesome.
water song in our lodges and with our schools and education, and everywhere we go, we share our teachings around the water. There was a number of people within the local First Nation community here that took the lead on this. Environmental assessments were asked of. There was, what do you call it, petitions going around. And they would show up at all of the community meetings where, the mayor and council of the mainland were trying to push, this solution of putting sewage in the water. And really, it's about expansion. And it's about all of that growth from the GTA. We're only an hour north. The 404 comes right here to Georgina. They're expecting over 70,000 homes this year and another 70,000 next year. So what are they doing with the influx of all of those people and traffic and all of that? And, our lake here is already stressed. There's already signs that there's problems. So adding more problems to a lake that's already been identified, let's stop and take a breath here and slow down, and maybe you might have to reverse some of your skills here, is what the message has been. I'm really glad that they made that voice happen for the Chippewas of Georgina Island out to the communities and out to the stakeholders around the lake. Again, I've had those conversations with the mayor, Cedar, and I ourselves saying, like, it's not a solution. You're not putting it in the lake. You have a duty to consult. And yes, they have a duty to consult Chippewas of Georgina Island, but this is also Williams Treaty. There's 5 other nations. That waterway is going to affect the other 5 nations. So Chippewas aren't the only ones they have to consult. And even that duty to consult, I was asked to come in and sit on a thing, and it was like it was a community engagement strategy is what they had hired me for as a consultant. And when I got in, it was something about water pollution in the lake or water particles in the lake or something, and they wanted to meet the local First Nation, and it seemed really shady to me. And I said, I don't know what you're asking of me, but I want to be very clear. This is not a duty to consult. I am not giving you permission. This is not in any way an information sharing session about any contaminants going into Lake Simcoe. And I just want to be very clear, and I want that stated on the record, because they had all the resistance from the Chippewas. They had the resistance from Cedar and I. But when they hired me as a consultant and had this information session, and there was no Indigenous people in there, and then talked about pollutants going into Lake Simcoe, and I was just like, am I like their token native that they brought in to say, hey, we consulted with someone and we're just going to push ahead and do it, which has kind of been like Canada's history of, duty to consult is they'll pick up the phone and say, we're putting pollution in your lake, and hang up the phone. So that's, there's never really been a willingness or a duty to consult and engage with First Nations. But, I think more and more these developers and municipalities are realizing, we're nations. We are nation to nation. We are allowed, and we have a right to say no. And, the way I look at it, Canadians and settlers live on 98% of the land base. We collectively, as 633 nations, reside on less than 2%. Of that 2%, we're the ones with the majority of unclean drinking water. At what time do we say enough is enough? Like, for me, not one more inch of land and no more water. Like, enough is enough. Like, it couldn't be any clearer, right? So, no amount of negotiations, no amount of backroom deals, no amount of, like, if you want to, none of it. Absolutely none. We are not giving away any more land, and we are actually coming to take land back. That's how I see it. So why would we allow, pollution into the lake? I'm looking at Cedar and her next 7 generations. There's no way they're putting sewage in that lake. I already told them we would be on the shorelines with our drums, and we would blockade, and we would do everything we can to protect this lake. And like I said, Chippewas are right here in this local region, Chippewas of Georgina Island, but this is Williams Treaty. And on the other side of the lake is Rama First Nation, and further up, you know, we've got Christian Island. South, you know, we've got all of the Williams Treaty with Alderville, and all of our waterways. All of our waterways are connected along here. So what happens to one is happening to another. And you know, I remember the omnibus bill. I remember December 12th, 2012, the launch and this big, huge uprising of Idle No More, and it was in response to taking the protection off over, what was it, 12, I don't know the numbers and I don't want to give false information, but like thousands of lakes and rivers were protected in this country. And the conservative government during that omnibus bill, December 12th, just went through bylaw or law after law and took all the protection off all of our lakes and rivers, so that there was less than like 1,200, I guess, across the nation. That was like dirty politics, but it directly affects our next 7 generations. So what do? Well, we're going to stand up and we're going to speak to it. And, you know, I'm working with a group right now in Pearson Park and Nogby. You know, they're taking the sacred land there, or trying to. Metrolinx is trying to push. So the city of Toronto gave the Indigenous youth of Toronto a beautiful space, and their ceremonies, a canoe built there along the water. You know, it's a beautiful space. And now Metrolinx has decided that they're going to push and put a train up above ground right across those grounds. And the youth are saying, no, like, you don't understand. There's trees, there's this, there's that. So they're coming in to clear cut trees. So it's like, no, you can't do that either. Like, our trees are connected to the water. Everything is so interconnected here. This is sacred. You've given it to us. You've already stolen it from us. We've gotten it back. And now you want to like push this through. So, you know, we're fighting that. And I think it's, at what point do settlers and developers and everybody say, you know, we're not going to railroad and push through Native people anymore. We're not going to displace them. We're not going to ruin their land. Like, at what point is it enough? Like, you know, I think Canadians and the general public, you know, what are we doing to our Mother Earth? What are we doing to our water? When Lake Simcoe was stressed, when Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, you've already seen the damage done to them. And, you know, you just want to displace the waste and put it somewhere else. And, you know, the nuclear dumps under the Great Lakes, like, it's what were they thinking? And what are we thinking moving towards the future? And I think we think of our 7 generations. As soon as they talked about the sewage going into the lake, I thought, those are my great grandchildren. What are they thinking? And I don't know if politicians think past their 2-year term. I don't think if they, you know, I wonder, do you not think about your grandchildren? Do you guys not think about your grandchildren? You know, it's sad, but I think, like I said, I think that there's a shift. So the Upper York sewage solution has now been canceled. It's been done. They did not fulfill their consultation. They did not follow through with all of the environmental assessments that were required. So it's dead in the water. It's not going to happen. So that's beautiful. But what are they going to do with it? So I guess their alternative is they're going to ship it back down to Lake Ontario. And I guess that's been the norm for Toronto and residents for a long time, which is sad. They're just moving it from one space to another. So it's all going to affect the water. But right here in my backyard, it's not right here for now, but, you know, we're still fighting it. Like, there has to be alternatives. You know, there's got to be alternatives to, you know, when they're cleansing the water or they're treating the water in these treatment plants, and what does that look like? And, you know, that water that flows through there, can that be used for other municipal sources? Like, you see them using clean, fresh water for watering the lawns and stuff for lawns, you know, grow some gardens, grow some food. We're going to be moving into a food shortage in the next generations, I foresee. You know, there's things, so much we can do with water, and I think a lot of it is wasted. There isn't a connection to it for many, and I think that more and more need to hear that message. I think that they should be leading those discussions. You know, I mean, I look at Autumn Peltier and I look at her tremendous voice and her work, and you know, all the work that she's doing traveling around the world. We, an Indigenous country, know who she is. we're all so proud of the work that she's doing. Do Canadians know who she is? Do they know the work that she's doing? Do they know the traditional ecological knowledge that's tied to her generational knowledge, that she's had so many beautiful aunties and grandmothers and so many wonderful knowledge keepers, and those women that hold that nibi so sacred? She should, she's right where she needs to be in our communities where we would like her to be. But, as an Ontario water ambassador, what does that mean for the rest of Canada or Ontario? Are they aware? Do they know? So I think we need to have more people in all of those spaces and leading those discussions and those talks. I think that needs to happen across the board. But, specifically in water and environment, but I think that in every aspect: justice, policing, education. I mean, Indigenous women need to be, and I tell people that all the time, and when I'm working with agencies, who's in your toolbox of resources to help you set policy for the work that's going to commence? What worldview and what lens? And if there's no Indigenous people setting policy and working with you, then we need to start over again, because you have to have them at the table. You have to have us at the table. We have knowledge keepers, we have medicine people, we have environmentalists, we have professors and doctors, and we have beautiful, wonderful, magnificent people within our communities that also carry this beautiful traditional ecological knowledge that needs to be valued. So I think we need to take a seat at the table everywhere. Everywhere. We have to start taking up these spaces and start changing those directions, and, the consumption of water to the protection of water. Just preparing, but in the overall, I think our whole lives, and Cedar's pretty much like Cedar's whole life on Georgina Island. I mean, they've been in a boil water advisory. I think it just most recently came off in the last 2 years. They're only an hour north of Toronto. They're not isolated. They're not, there was no willingness or incentive to fix it because the government didn't have to, because they're natives. What is the cost of clean drinking water in a non-Indigenous community? Nobody would question it. But if it's a First Nation, well, how much is that going to cost? Because we're drains on taxpayers' money. And that's that old stereotype that the government keeps instilling in every Canadian. So they create this division so that Canadians push for us to assimilate and not be special and get all these benefits. But if they really knew, we're scraping the bottom of the barrel for services. So I think, when we look at climate, we look at climate change. For us as Indigenous people, we really have to go back to the land and know those teachings. We have to know those ceremonies. We have to hold those ceremonies. We have to know the songs. We have to know those medicines. All of that is so key to our next 7 generations. I want my daughter to know the water song, and I want her to know the plants to pick that are going to help her lungs. When the black ash comes across the sky, or those spider webs, as our prophecies say, when those black spider webs burn the skies, what are those medicines that are going to cleanse the air? Those are those medicines, those are those teachings. That's the education that I want to pass down to my daughter and to my other, family members and my grandchildren. Those faces that I have yet to see, I need Cedar to know those teachings, to hand it down to those ones. So that's key in our own personal preparation for climate change. But really raising awareness around the world, and raising awareness about the importance and sacredness of water and the protection of water, and really understanding there's nothing that can replace water. Absolutely nothing can replace water, and water gives all life to everything. All of the beautiful green that we see around us, our flyers, our swimmers, our crawlers, our sustenance, our food, everything is so much tied to that water. It's not going to come out of the tap freely in the next generations. We're really going to have to look after it. So, Canada has some of the largest freshwater sources in the world, and, the powers that be are talking about selling them or putting nuclear waste, further dumping, and they have to really understand what are they doing to their next 7 generations. So hopefully the voices of Indigenous women will reach some of these ears, or the wives of these men in these political power positions. And, that's where we need to take up space too, is in these leadership roles. And it's a really oppressive political system, and people have asked me to run for politics, and I'm like, no. But I really do believe that we need to have Indigenous people in those spaces to steer those conversations and directions back to protection of the earth and the environment. Absolutely. And I think we need to have those voices present, because that's the only voices they're hearing is their own, in those big chambers and rooms. And, they think that all the power sits in that room, but really the power and strength is Mother Earth and the water and what she says goes, and in a heartbeat, all of this could be gone with the strength of that knee beat. Once they realize that the protection of Mother Earth, if we don't protect her, what's going to happen to the human nation? Mother Earth is going to cleanse herself. Doesn't mean it's the end of the earth. It means that she's going to shake and she's going to shudder and she's going to cleanse the earth of all of these things that are consuming from her, and she's going to be rebirth, that regrowth, right? And our prophecies talk about it. We're going to lose a lot of our population, but those ones that are remaining and the children of, are they going to have those teachings to protect the earth? Are they going to have those teachings in those songs, the language? I have great hope for the future. I absolutely do. I see that such strength and resilience in our young people, and this, the whole reclamation and back on the land, and I love it. I have great hope for our youth, absolutely. And I think that moving forward in the next generations, they know the importance and strength of water at such a young age, that it's their way of life. It's ceremony. Water is ceremony. Letting us lead, I think that we just need to take the lead.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to give it to us. Equality looks like discrimination when you're used to privilege. Nobody's going to give up those seats in power. Nobody's going to give up their space in their chair for an Indigenous woman come and sit and share her viewpoint. But we have to take up those spaces, and we have to assert our sovereignty in every aspect of our lives and how we move forward. And especially when it comes to climate change, we have to take up these spaces, and we have to make change, and we have to have our voices heard. And we need Ogitchada, we need our men at our sides while we're doing this work for the water, to protect us, to get us to do this, get us to our next steps to do this work for the water. So it's really key and important. And, like I said, the voice of Indigenous. I'm so honored to work with the women that I work with, like the most powerful, resilient, strong women, and they carry that beautiful traditional ecological knowledge. And I think, people need to hear that voice. And I really, really hope that it's in this generation or the next generation, that the powers that be in these positions of self-aggrandizement and power, that they really understand, they don't want their children to go thirsty. They don't want their children to not have clean drinking water. And when their children and grandchildren go thirsty, then they'll come to our grandchildren and ask for help, right? I think that now's the time to hear that message, and hopefully they can put that aside, that racism and that degrading and devaluing of us as human nation, in order to take the land, and that whole consuming of. I think that if we could shift that way of thinking back to the protection of Mother Earth, and that we are all here as one, as human nation, there's more similarities between us than there are differences, that we all rely on the water, that we're made up of 87% water and 13% mineral. If we look after the water, it means we're looking after each other, right? So it would be nice if they could get that message. I think that we need to take those spaces. I don't think anybody's going to let us have them. I think we need to take them and have our voices heard. Right now I teach teachers. I'm a guest lecturer in different universities, and for the past 13 years I teach educators about traditional ecological knowledge and our role as women in the water. So I'm hoping that that's going to ripple out to those teachers, and that they're going to share that with their students. And that's just one small step I take. But if each and every one of us is educating someone around us, and it just builds, and again, taking up those spaces in these positions of political power, then those are those places there where we need to have our voices heard.